Okay, thank you very much, Christian, for taking the time to talk about how we're going to be doing pull request reviews in general, starting from today going forward for the GSOC announcement that we've just seen. When you're looking at the various pull requests, you should think about them in a slightly different way. There's going to be a need for discretion in the approvals of the pull requests and the assignments of people. So let's just take a look at one of these pull requests. You will see that CodeRabbit has done some work and making sure that it gives you some ideas to what's going on. And we have a standard message that comes up in the pull request documentation. You'll also see an indication as to whether the code has been has met the requirements that we have as much as possible, 100% code coverage. In this particular case, this particular person has mentioned that they've created a test, but however, this report mentions that there are no files that have been modified. There's been no change, no significant change. And so we have to make sure that the tests pass as much as we can. Oh, sorry, in this case, it does say the test has been 100%. All right. So we have all these tests that are run, and this one seems to be a good example of tests running. And the place that these tests are created is in these configuration files that we have in the specialized location in GitHub, which is this particular file here. And the name of each test, as you can see here, the pull request target name and all of these names are listed in the names that you see here in these files. And I'm just showing you this because it just gives you some context as to what's going on. The tests are run in not necessarily always in sequence. Sometimes they're run in out of sequence. And the way that is defined in these files are by name. So you'll see here that this thing has a name, start application without Docker, but this actually won't start until this check has been done and this check has been done as well. And this has some implications for some of the work that we do. There are some of the tests do things to make sure that the code is linted properly, which means things like people using variables that are actually or defining variables that are actually used later on. There are things like making sure that the code is. We have another test to make sure that the code is documented properly, because we have these actions that go through and extract the comments out of the files and then deposits them on our various Tallow related websites and our various repository related websites. And so it's important that these tests pass so that the quality of the documentation is good. And I wanted to mention that in this particular case, the one that I showed you before, it shows you that the patch of the pull request, and the patch is just the files that have been changed in the pull request. It shows you that it has 100% code coverage, and that's a good indicator that this person for this particular pull request has done all the required tests. And whether or not the pull request is for a test or adding a feature or fixing a bug, we need to make sure that the code coverage patch is as close to 100% as possible. Now, students have found ways in which they can rig the system. And one of the things that they can do is that they can go into the original source code of the file and add an ignore statement, which will say, please ignore this block of code from calculating the test code coverage. And so therefore, if something has a code coverage of 50%, they can go in and add these ignore statements for the remaining 50% of the code, and miraculously, the code coverage is 100%. And we have tests that go through and double check that people haven't put in statements in the code base that ignore the code coverage, that ignore the correct linting of the files. And those tests are mandatory. And the actual testing of the application won't start until these good code practices are done. But there's some other tests that will run in parallel. Some of them will run independently, and I just want to show you how that operates. One of the most common things that happens is that the code coverage doesn't always get calculated. You don't always see this message here. Or the message is there, but somebody has done like a new commit, and this hasn't been, or this doesn't get updated. So they've done multiple commits. Like this, for example, would say the comment was 3 days ago or 4 days ago, but the person has done multiple updates in this thing. And so one of the ways in which you can re-trigger this action happening is that you can go in as a member of the organization of Palisadoes and delete the comment. Now, when this comment is deleted, it won't get automatically regenerated until you restart the whole testing regime that you see here. And the easiest way to do that is to go into the code. Just take a look here and you will see run test. Just look for the run test one, because it's the run test that triggers the code coverage report. And what you'll do is you open this link in a separate tab, because I want to do this so that it's very, very clear. And you can ask it to rerun the jobs. And you just click on this, and you don't have to enable logging, but sometimes I just do it out of habit. And you do rerun the jobs. And here you can see the various dependencies in the file that I just mentioned before. Right, so here you can see it's testing for the code coverage. It makes sure that there's some certain basic checks are done. It double checks that the variables are defined correctly, and that the branch that the person is using is the correct one, and various other things. And then it'll go through all these other various dependencies, and at the very end, it'll go through and one of the tests is to validate that CodeRabbit says that everything is okay. This test, the CodeRabbit validation test, doesn't always happen. And so if this test is failing, it may be a false negative. And what you should do, just to be on the safe side, is come back to the pull request, scroll up to the very top, and just make sure that the CodeRabbit test has passed or not. Now, I want to show you some other things. In the same file that governs what sort of checks we do in the pull request, there is a check to make sure that certain sensitive files are not modified. Now I'm just going to scroll up. As a participant in this evaluation of pull requests, you don't have to know where this configuration file is located, but you just need to know that we go through and check certain files just to make sure that people don't mess things up. Now, in certain cases, they need to modify these files. For example, somebody might make a change to the structure of a database, or they may make a change to the structure of the query to the database. And this is where the most common changes are. And that file in which you modify the structure of the queries, etc., is the schema.graphql file. And so there may be situations in which they want to modify this, and the test will fail legitimately, but then at the same time, it's not quite legitimate. It needs to be it needs to be taken into consideration, or not so much consideration. It needs to be ignored. And so what happens is that this test has a check to say that if the pull request, and let's just highlight it here, if the pull request has a label, and that label is ignore sensitive files PR, then the test will be skipped. And you as the participant or as the reviewer can take a look at this file, take a look at the pull request and add the label. So let's just take a look. As you can see, this thing is continuing to be generated. And we're going to come back to the pull request, and I'll show you that the code coverage, fingers crossed, that report is going to be will be generated. So the way that you can do this, and the way that you can make sure that this label of ignore sensitive files is applied in these exceptional cases, is to click here and apply the ignore sensitive files PR label. And that will skip all subsequent tests, or all subsequent evaluations of the whole test suite. So I'm just going to take this off right now. These tests are run every time somebody makes a commit. That means every time somebody makes an update. Right? And let's just see whether the code coverage. Here you can see the code coverage report has been generated. All right. So you can see that this is how you can, like, say, for example, somebody says, hey, I've made all these changes. The code coverage is now 100%. And you look at it and say, well, I'm not too sure. Just click on the test, run tests thing down here. Delete the code coverage message and then see whether it gets generated. You can take a look at the report that is generated by clicking on this link, and we're just going to do that really quickly here. And if this thing has been done correctly, as you can see, this document has now been tested 100%. All right, and you can see that from the patch. The patch is 100%. The person has done a marvelous job. They've moved it from maybe 16% code coverage to 84% code coverage in this one change. So now, when you take a look at this this whole review, it'll look and seem as if all the tests haven't passed. But be careful. Remember, see, the pull request for the CodeRabbit validation has failed, and so it may seem as if this is not ready, but it actually is. And based on this, you can now notify people in the preferred code reviewers to start taking a look and approving these things. And you can say in the pull request comments at whoever the preferred reviewer is, please take a look at this pull request and merge it whenever, and that can be very useful. So that's something else here. And you can see the whole tests have gone through, right? And remember, you get to this screen by clicking on the run tests link in the pull request itself, and then doing the rerun jobs link here. So that really helps us to get things going. Let's see what else there is that could be very useful. I think that's all that I just wanted to let you be aware of. So if there's one thing that comes out of this discussion, tests may fail in a false positive way. And in some cases, we may want to make an exception to somebody not having 100% code coverage. Maybe they say, well, I've been trying as much as possible to do the 100%, but there's something that's going on, but I can get to like 97% or 95%. Well, if that's the case, then make an exception and say, all right, I'll make an exception. So that's one thing that may happen. There's another thing that can also happen is that CodeRabbit may make nonsense requests for changes. It's AI, so it hallucinates. It'll tell you that no, that's not blue, that's actually green, but you know it's blue, and so therefore you may want to. The person may say, I've been doing everything that CodeRabbit has said to do, but it's reaching a point of diminishing returns. It's just not valuable, and therefore there needs to be a little bit of discretion. For the most part, we try as much as possible to catch everything, but not all the time. So if tests fail, you cannot really always say, make sure all the tests pass. There's situations in which this may not necessarily be the case. Now, in order to help with many of these messages, over the years, we've tried to have lists of statements that we can post in the various comments so that people don't take offense to what's going on. And we try as much as possible to ensure that the messaging is well written. And we have this document, it's called the Standard Messages document, and it's arranged more or less in alphabetical order by topic. And one of the things, for example, is that if somebody here is constantly closing pull requests, well, you can go to the closing pull request section and you can just cut and paste, not cut and paste it, but copy this and post it in the comments and saying, hey, you're doing too much stuff. Or if the person has modified the sensitive test file, then you can put this there. So this also helps. I want to just go back to the pull request that we were looking at originally, because there's some other stuff that we've tried as much as possible to do. When tests fail, like this one, which is the pull rabbit validation test. So let's just take a look at this. When you click on the link, as much as possible, we have tried with some of our tests to state specifically why the test has failed and what they need to do to fix it. And so that when somebody comes to you and says, I don't know what's going on, this is not something that I understand, well, you can tell them, click on the link, evaluate it, and see what the error says. And so in this case, it says, this pull request is not approved by CodeRabbit AI. In the add a comment section at the bottom of the PR, add a comment with the statement below to restart a review. And so that's one of them. And then that will help do stuff. And there's some other things like the test for sensitive files. When if that turns red and you click on it, it'll say you have edited this particular file, which is a bad thing. Ask for the sensitive files label to be added so that this test doesn't fail. And so we try as much as possible to make it as transparent as possible for everybody to participate, and that's really, really important. Thank you, everybody, and I hope this has been really helpful